Why did you get into the law, this type of practice?
Well, I like none of my clients go to jail, and most of my clients like me when we're done. So, but I was in the Air Force for over 20 years, and when I retired, I was here in Florida. I told my kids I wouldn't move them anymore after I retired, so I opened an office here in Florida in '06, and there seemed to be a need for bankruptcy and foreclosure defense, another thing we do. And so we went in, started that. My paralegal has a lot of experience. She's been doing it for over 20 years. And so I started in '06 when I retired doing bankruptcy, and been happy. Most of my clients are happy.
Well, that's a good thing, Paul. That's a major thing to have happy clients.
Yeah.
I wanted to find out about the difference with the consolidating. When you're going, because I know years before I was going to file for bankruptcy, and I went to a consolidation company, and they pretty much said, no, bankruptcy is bad. You need to consolidate. So is there anything you can shed on that?
Well, I mean, you're asking a guy that makes his living filing bankruptcy.
I know.
So let me say, consolidation is not a bad thing. Consumer Credit Counseling is a company that I dealt with in the military a lot for kids, in the military, because I was in for 20 years, and eventually I had kids working for me. And they don't teach in high school how to manage checkbooks and manage debt. And the military started when I was started to educate people about buying cars and compounding interest and all of that. But still, kids got in trouble. And we worked with the Family Support Center at the base, and there was consumer credit counseling, and there were options. And that is not a bad thing for some. There are for-profit type consolidation companies that take and collect the money and put it into a pool, and then they try and settle for less than the amount owed. I don't really like that, because if they're pooling the money, the creditors aren't getting paid. So in these bad type consolidations, they take all their fees up front, they create a pool of money, and they try and negotiate settlements. That results in the debtor paying a 1099, which is a tax. So if you have a $10,000 credit card, they settle it for $5,000. You get a 1099 for $5,000, and you have to pay taxes on that because you had debt forgiven. In that situation, also, some of the creditors don't agree to work, and they end up filing suit. And then these consolidation companies don't help the debtor. So now they're getting sued in small claims court and civil court because they're not getting paid, and that consolidation company is collecting all their fees. So it depends on the consolidation company. Now that's the bad one. That's where they take all their money up front, they create a pool, and they try and settle the debt, and you get 1099s, you get lawsuits. It's a big mess. The consumer credit counseling the companies that the military worked with in the local community, they wrote letters that said, we have a hardship. This kid is talking to us. He's in the military. He's deploying. This is all of the situation. Can you just reduce the interest? And some of the banks would give him 0% for 12 months, and they'd have to reapply. But every payment they made for the next 12 months was principal. And then some of them would say, well, instead of 18.99% interest, we're going to give him 6% for the next 12 months, and he needs to reapply. He or she needs to reapply. So when we were working with counseling, and they were trying to consolidate into one payment, and the company would take a percentage, and then they would tell you, these companies aren't agreeing to work with us. These people you need to deal with. So let's say a kid goes in with 8 credit cards, 6 of the companies offer him 0% or minimal percent, 6%. They're going to he's going to send one payment to the consumer credit counseling, and they're going to pay all those people, and they're going to keep track of it. And they're going to take a 1 or 2%, 3%, well, I don't remember what it was. And then he had the 2 that didn't play that he needed to make minimum payments on or do something with. And that the counseling and the consolidating in that situation, I felt that it worked. But those people also did an analysis and didn't say whether bankruptcy was good or bad. They said, if it works and these bank companies work with you and you're paying these people direct, here's your budget. Your budget says you can afford this and you'll still have $50 left over to put in a savings. You know, you can pay your groceries, you can pay your car payment, you can pay your insurance and all that. But then that counseling company, they also said, look, even if everybody works with us, it's not going to work. You don't have enough money. You need to consult a bankruptcy attorney. And so when you say consolidation, I think of the two different, and then I think there is some good and I think there is some bad. And I think it comes back to why we do free consultations, because I have told many clients, no, you don't need to file bankruptcy. This is not as bad as you think it is. It's emotionally draining. It's stressful. But you can probably work through this. And I've had a longer than a 30, I went twice as long as a normal consultation. So instead of a 30-minute, it was an hour. And I said, and what do you think? And she started crying and said, I just can't handle the stress. I want to file bankruptcy anyway. I was like, well, that's your choice. But I try and be as honest as I can and say, this is a good idea. This isn't a bad idea. This is a personal decision.
Well, bankruptcy is stressful. Regardless,
Yes, it is still stressful, but it has a defined light at the end of the tunnel. If you hire us, if we file on January 6th, by June 30th, you will be debt free and you will know the results of everything. It'll all be dealt with and you will be stress free after that. Hopefully.
Well, even after filing bankruptcy, I understand too that the blessing in that is that it stops the harassment of the debtors.
Yeah, the creditors.
Creditors.
Yeah, the creditors have to stop. Once you file a petition for relief, you're asking the federal court, the bankruptcy court, for relief from your creditors and a chance to calm and reorganize. That stay, called a stay, the automatic stay. It goes into place, and they can't call you, they can't write to you. And some of my clients find it stressful because they won't even talk to them when they call them. They know we have to talk to your attorney. So all the phone calls will stop in a very short amount of time, and the letters will go away, and I'll deal with it for you, or your attorney will.
What are some of the things to stay out of bankruptcy?
Well, what happens is there's priority debts. We talked about some of those, the ones that don't go away. You have to list them, you have to disclose them, but they're going to stay even after the bankruptcy. So 99.9% of the time, the student loan is still going to be there. Next type is secured debts. That's where you have car loans, home loans, boat loans, motorcycle loans. You have to decide. In a Chapter 7, you'd file a statement of intentions that says, I want to keep my car. I want to keep my house. I do not want the boat. I do not want the motorcycle. And so the ones that'll stay out is you and the creditor say, you file bankruptcy and say, I own a home. You file bankruptcy and say, I have a mortgage. And you say, your statement of intention is, I'm going to continue to make the payments. And that means that your house stays out of the bank. Well, your house comes back out of the bankruptcy, So you keep making the payments, they don't foreclose. Same with the car. You keep making the payments, they don't repossess. And then the ones that you don't want, say you had a motorcycle and a boat that you just couldn't afford anymore because of a change in life, that basically gets surrendered to the creditor. And
okay. Yeah. Can a judge turn down a request for bankruptcy?
You can be denied bankruptcy relief for fraud. So if you lie on your bankruptcy petition, you can be denied bankruptcy relief. You can also be denied if you filed bankruptcy before or within, and each chapter is different. You have, from a Chapter 7 to a Chapter 7, there's an 8-year limitation. So you have to file bankruptcy after the 8 years. It's different if you're going from 7 to 13 or 13 to 7 or 13 to 13. There's different rules for each one, but there are time limits. And your attorney can look at the dates and tell you which one you're qualified for. Individual creditors can file objections to discharge, though. They can, if you were flipping homes back in '04, '05, '06, and you did a no-doc loan and told them you made $120,000 a year, that's how you qualified for that mortgage, but it turns out that you only made $40,000 a year, that's fraud. And you can be denied relief if you committed fraud. You lied on the application to qualify.
So will that be considered like a criminal offense, or just your bankruptcy, you won't receive any?
You won't receive a discharge for that debt.
Okay.
So that debt would be stuck. You'd be stuck with it. It would be extreme and very complex to go into.
Right.
Just getting flat out denied. But it's usually time limits. You can only file so often. And individual creditors can sometimes object because they were frauded. But it's very rare.
So what is the age for filing bankruptcy? Is it over 18 or?
Yes, but they're usually not in debt by then. Usually we're waiting until about 22.
Okay.
You need a little bit of time to run up that debt, Like I have a client that is younger, but he had an auto accident and he was carrying the minimums and he hit an expensive car. And so the insurance company is coming after him for subrogation, meaning they had to pay out because he didn't have enough insurance. So he's about the youngest, 22.
So what do you think that some of the reasons that we fall into debt is? You think it's because of the lack of understanding money, or is it just, what do you think it is?
I would say that it's very rare that it's a mismanagement or, there are the occasional drug and alcohol problems and gambling problems and stuff like that. But most of the time it's life events. You build your life and your budget based on two people living in the same home and you get a divorce. Now, neither one of your budgets work because you don't have the other. You have two more rents. You have two phone bills. You have two cable bills. You have two water bills. So divorce is very common. Kids getting sick, people getting sick. I have a good friend of mine. He's a client, but he's a good friend too. He got cancer and he, had to stop working because of his cancer treatments. And I just high-fived him right before Christmas Eve and said, cancer-free. So, but, that time when he was unemployed, couldn't work because of his illness, he ran into debt. His budget doesn't work if he doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So, illness, children's illnesses, you have a premature baby and don't have a good enough insurance and you spend a couple of nights a week, 2 weeks in the NICU, that can be expensive. So medical bills, divorce, death. You mentioned earlier if a spouse dies. I've had a few where, one of them passes away and they end up with, one income and a whole lot of debt based on two of them working. So,
So what do you find most coming into your office to file bankruptcy? Is it more men or women or equal or?
I don't have any, I couldn't say one way or the other. I don't really track it by that. I will tell you, usually if it's a married couple, the woman's making the decision.
That's a smart move.
Yeah. A lot of times it's the guys are like, whatever you want to do. And the women are like, we're filing bankruptcy because we're going to fix this and we're going to move on.
Yeah.
Guys are kind of easygoing, but I wouldn't say one way or the other. Today alone, it was 50-50. So.
But you know what? Even with the responsibility of bankruptcy put on you as a lawyer, taking care, making sure this is done, we also have responsibility as well. I believe there's a class that we have to go through or some other training financially.
Yeah.
Talk about that for us.
Well, in order to file bankruptcy, you have to have an independent third party give you a credit counseling course. So prior to filing, you have to attend a credit counseling that's usually over the internet. Involves you filling out a questionnaire and a budget, income and expense, and debts and assets.